Welcome back. This video will cover part 2 of Chapter 7, Sport and Performance Psychology for PSY 120, Careers in Psychology, Neuroscience, and Human Development. In this part of the chapter, we're going to look at opportunities with advanced degrees. We'll start with building a career as a sport psychologist. Remember that term, psychologist, is a protected term. The assumption is that you're a person, if you use the label psychologist, you're a person who has a license and credentials to be a psychologist. Typically that means you have a doctoral level education in that area. Like some of the other areas we've explored, like forensic psychology, for example, sports psychologists are typically people who have their primary education as clinical or counseling psychologists, but their area of specialization is sport. And we'll talk more about that in a bit. So what are sports psychologists who are practitioners doing? Sports psychologists work to really focus in on the mental health of athletes. So if they're, depending on where they're employed, these are individuals who use their training as clinical or counseling psychologists to help athletes deal with anxiety, attention, motivation, confidence, and so on, with the goal of, maximizing mental health, but also maximizing performance. They can also engage with athletes, managing mental health conditions that the person comes into the sport context with, but they may also work with athletes who are becoming burned out, who are injured, and are recovering from injury. They may provide individual and group counseling services to athletes. In some cases, if you're talking about team sports, the dynamics of building a team and keeping those dynamics positive is really, really challenging. And in some cases, sports psychologists are involved with working with the group, not just when they're in crisis, but also when they're doing well, because you want to maintain that set of relationships. Large colleges and universities, like I read a story recently about the idea that the Ohio State University has its own counseling center, and within that counseling center they have PhD level sports psychologists, but they also have a whole kind of army of master's level counselors who work with athletes during the year. Now, smaller universities are not going to have the resources to hire sports psychologists and keep them year-round. They may have to contract out. And in fact, there are private practices out there that do nothing but sports psychology. Professional teams, some college teams, and other kinds of sports organizations like the Olympic Committee are going to hire sports psychologists to work with individuals and with teams. The median salary for sports psychologists, you're not going to be able to look that up specifically, but since sports psychologists are licensed as clinical or counseling psychologists, you can go by that data. And the median salary in 2022 was about $90,000. Other databases, the median is going to be somewhat higher, somewhat lower, depending on what data they're using. Some sports psychologists are not in practice. Some of them are researchers and academics instead. These are individuals who study kind of at the basic level, like the practitioners. They are on the applied side. They take what the research sports psychologists have determined works and then apply it in the real world. So they're going to study factors that enhance performance, detract from it, etc. Their goal in some cases is to take that research and those findings and develop interventions, evaluate those interventions such that effective interventions can be taken out into practice by other sports psychologists working directly with athletes. They may study leadership and group dynamics. They may develop training programs for leadership. They may work in program development in youth sports. In part, that can be to develop leadership skills, develop athletic skills, be healthy and successful as an athlete. But it can also go to the development of personality attributes like good sportsmanship. Some sports psychologists do their own research in academic settings. Others are going to be found in nonprofits, in private companies, in government agencies. Now this one, it may not occur to you at all that this would be a place where someone with an interest in sports psychology or even, a full doctoral degree in that area might be working. But bear with me. In some cases, sports psychologists are going to apply what they know to enhance performance in organizations as a whole. Now, sometimes that involves actual physical activities, but sports psychologists there's a really strong overlap, especially in the leadership domain, in the motivation and group performance domain. There's a lot of overlap in the theory and the basic research that's involved. So there are cases where sports psychologists may bring what they know to the table to enhance organizational performance. More likely, they're going to be engaged in working to build programs and assess programs that address mental health needs for employees, frequently applying exercise programs, fitness programs, and so on to reduce stress and reduce the likelihood of burnout. They may work with human resources professionals to do initial assessments, to make physical fitness and mental health really priorities for the organization in ways that can help people be successful. They may also, depending on what their background and training is, work to help people build healthy group dynamics, to use good communication, and so on. They may work with management and employees to build conflict resolution skills. There's a lot of, team sport work, if a sports psychologist is a specialist in that area, can be directly applied to a business setting. They may also be hired as consultants. So when you look at this slide and you're thinking, okay, I still don't see how sport is involved, it's more that this is an adjacent area where the same skills can be highly transferable. So you're not likely to be working directly in the sport domain, but you're taking skills and abilities and research and theory that easily transfers into a business environment. What are some of the considerations for graduate education and training? Sport and performance psychologists in the practice area have to have a license. So there's a couple of different pathways that you can seek, that you can follow. You can get a doctoral degree in clinical or counseling and specialize in sport. You can get some experience directly in pre- or postdoctoral fellowships working in a sport environment. The second option is to find a sports psychology program that, the entire focus is on sport and performance psychology, as opposed to getting a general clinical counseling degree with it's almost like the graduate version of a minor, an area of specialization after the fact. Both options, regardless of which pathway you take to the doctoral degree, you're going to have to get licensure to practice as a psychologist. Graduate training in sports psychology is very, very specialized. So if this is something that's attractive to you, you may want to look for broader programs, programs that give you a really, really solid background in clinical and counseling, because many people who work in this space have their clinical or counseling degree, and they don't work 100% of the time in the in sport with athletes, with teams. That may be one aspect of their training and their practice, but they also spend time in general practice working as a psychologist with people in other kinds of situations. So that's the doctoral level. What about master's level careers that are related to sports psychology? There are master's programs that are available in sports psychology. I wouldn't say that they're particularly common, but they are becoming more so. And, this is consistent with broader trends in counseling and clinical psychology generally. In many cases, people who are, working one-on-one with athletes, working with teams, the master's degree in counseling is sufficient. You're getting your training in counseling techniques, in psychopathology, in working with clients to improve their mental health. The additional part of it is applying that to sport. So we're seeing more and more often, there's still a need for people at the doctoral level, but the real boots on the ground army delivering psychological services is people with master's degrees. These sport-specific master's programs give people the academic grounding in both counseling practice or clinical practice, as well as sports psychology theory. Some programs are going to prepare people to become licensed professional counselors. They're going to engage in some cases similar activities as doctoral level psychologists. But as we've discussed before, having a master's in counseling means that you would need to be practicing under supervision of someone with a doctoral level degree. Some master's level sports psychologists are going to work in research. Now, typically, they're not going to be in an academic context, as most people working in academic contexts have PhDs or the equivalent. But some universities are very large, and they may have research programs and laboratories that hire people with master's degrees in this specific area to work in those laboratories. There are also private research organizations and nonprofits. Another area that I've actually learned a lot more about in the last couple of years, because my son-in-law is an athletic trainer at a D1 university. Athletic training, and I will say that people who are majoring in psychology, neuroscience, and human development in any of those areas, one of our most popular minors is connected to the work that athletic trainers do. So we have a lot of students in exercise science, and many of those exercise science students go on in areas like PT and athletic training. Athletic trainers, if you're an athlete, you know who these people are. They do their best to keep athletes healthy, to manage their injuries, to identify what problems athletes may be facing, and to provide first aid and emergency care when those injuries arise, but also to provide ongoing support and intervention for athletes to keep them as healthy as possible. They also will work with athletes and as well as medical staff to create and implement rehabilitation programs. They may be involved in certain administrative tasks. If they are in a managerial position as athletic trainers, they may be doing budgeting and program design. There has been a transition in the last decade or so For instance, many universities used to have bachelor's degree programs in athletic training, and that was considered to be a terminal degree. You got your BA in athletic training, and then you went on to be an athletic trainer. In recent years, the movement has been in the direction of updating the standards and requiring a master's degree. So what I've seen, including at my own institution, is universities moving away from having a bachelor's program and instead building master's programs that pull in their exercise science type students who are interested in AT careers. So there has been an enhanced professionalization of the AT field, and most positions now are going to be requiring that master's degree. Many students who are interested in athletic training do minor or even double major in psychology. I have a couple of advisees right now who are double majors in exercise science and psychology, and one of them is interested in getting a doctorate of physical therapy. The other is going into a master's program in AT. And that concludes my coverage of Chapter 7.